he was going to stay in Vancouver with Jock. And I thought this was pretty important, his friend from Bermuda. And I planned to have a cocktail party at Hotel Vancouver. And Jock, of course, was taking people out for dinner, right, left, and center. On the day of that I was to have the party, we had gone riding on the North Shore, and going over a little bridge, the friend's horse fell through the little wooden bridge over this little stream. And we had to get the firemen to get the horse out of it. It was quite a predicament. And we went back to the hotel, but they were successful. We went back to the hotel and we had sandwiches and chicken sandwiches. The party was to be that night. And I got a terrible stomach ache, and I had a food poisoning or something with terrible stomach ache. I could not go to my own party. However, the man whom Jock had turned out to be an interesting person, and his name was Johnny Stompanato. And he was a great, big, heavy-set, burly, good-looking man. And he was, and I'm just trying to remember the connection he had with Lana Turner. Anyway, whatever it was, later on in life, Lana Turner's daughter had his gun in some. She shot. Anyway, I'm getting a little bit hazy on the back. Anyway, it turned out big. And this man, responsible, he had. And I've never forgotten it because the paper's full of it. Not my name, but that one. We were at the penthouse. It had not happened. I wasn't very fond. And he was a good guy, and of course, Smith. Pretty wonderful. We all, and I've never sort of, a lot of people have it so long. And that's a little story.
Why don't you drink beer?
My father was a doctor, and he certainly was not somebody who wanted at this. I was the only daughter. My mother had and father had two children, but the first one died in childbirth, and then two sons. But when I was old enough to climb a ladder, my father took me to a small prairie in Shaunavon, Saskatchewan, whereupon he had me pointed up to these big wooden vats and said, I want you to climb up that ladder and take a look, and then tell me what you see. Well, that's pretty exciting, going up a ladder. I didn't have any fear of anything anyway. Up I went on this wooden ladder that was against the roof of that, where actually it was kind of hanging from the wooden vat, but I got up and was able to look into the vat, which was beer, of course, and I couldn't believe my eyes because I knew what a rat was. And the rat, there were 2 or 3 rats swimming around in the beer, in the vat. I never, ever wanted to touch a beer. And I didn't for years and years and years. Actually, until about 4 years ago, and I'm 91 now. And The only reason I did was we had a pub in one of the first God's waiting rooms I lived in. And in order to eat in the pub, which had a different menu that was in the dining room, and you could get a meal there at any time of the day, in order to really sort of not be chintzy, I bought a beer because that was their lost leader, and you got a pint for what's a tall glass, a pint?
Mm-hmm.
For $3, and I could nurse that all day if I wanted to eat there and really feel legitimate about sitting in a seat in the pub. And that was a long time after I know all the boyfriends, etc. I had, and the beer parties my friends had, and I couldn't touch a beer. However, and I was lucky because the first one I had in this pub was one of the craft beers. So it was made by one of the maintenance men in our particular abode. And so it really was quite tasty and quite nice. And well, I can't say I'm an avid beer drinker, but I will have one now and then. But I'm not wild about beer. I'm awfully glad he showed me that, because that really turned me off. So he never had to worry about me. I did like gin though.
Where did you learn to drive?
I learned to drive in Saskatchewan, and just outside of Shaunavon. I think it was Shaunavon. Or was it halfway to Waskesiu? I think maybe it was halfway to Waskesiu, so we lived in Prince Albert at this point. Well, it must have been for me to even be behind the wheel. And called Emma Lake. And we would drive out. My mother would organize these beautiful outdoor picnics in the snow and on the banks of which was sand in the summer, but the Emma Lake. And he would take the car out on the ice lake, which was ice now, being in northern Saskatchewan. We had a wonderful time, and I was really grateful for that, because I learned to drive on treacherous stuff, and it has always been to my advantage. When we moved to Vancouver and I did a lot of skiing at Mount Baker, they had me always drive, because I could handle a car on ice and in snow. It was kind of fun. Sometimes I was the only girl, and boys always said, "You drive, you've had the experience." So that's just something I don't do now, but I certainly stood me in good stead, and I was grateful for the learning on ice.
Where were you when John F. Kennedy was assassinated?
Well, isn't that interesting? Because that was a real sad moment for all of us. I was at Shaughnessy Golf Club playing in the duplicate game, and it was a Thursday. And our teacher and guidance and gentleman in bridge was Phil Wood, and we had a break, and he went out and came back ashen-faced and said, "The President of the United States has been shot, President Kennedy." So I've never forgotten that date. But I can't I can look it up to be sure.
November 64, I believe.
Well, I don't think that it could be November 64, because we went to Mexico in 1964. Did we come home from Mexico in 64? I guess came home.
Who was Grey Owl?
Oh, Grey Grail was one of my favorite well-known idols in my life. And I first learned of Grail when we took a trip to Adjwan Lake from Waskesiu to see this Indian and his famous beaver, Jelly Roll, and I can't think of the name at the moment. And it was quite a trip. We had portage, and the guides carried the canoes, and we walked, and then we came upon this dear little lake in the heart of Saskatchewan, northern Saskatchewan. And on it was a little cabin, and the smoke came curling out of the chimney, and we heard the slap, slap of the tails of the beavers on the little lake. And then this gorgeous big man who we were told was an Indian, and his name was Grail. His wife was Pony. And ultimately, they had a little girl, Shirley Dawn. However, this was my first meeting of him. He used to often come to Waskesiu and come across the lake and stand on the beach. And he was a very imposing, strong figure. And we always thought he was an Indian. Lots of Grail stories. But that was the beginning of my knowing him. The last was my father was his doctor, and he was put into hospital with pneumonia. My father put him there, and Daddy came home one day and said to my mother, "Mary, well, is not an Indian." My mom said, "How do you know?" "I know because he's been there 2 weeks, and the roots of his hair have grown out, and they're gray. He's a white man." So that was pretty stunning news, I think, for the whole world. I have lots of memories of Grail. As I say, he was a very imposing, well-known figure, and he wrote books, and he had these beaver, and the tourists came from all over to go and see his cabin on Adjwan Lake and the beaver. And the beavers even had a way of getting into the bungalow. And he just was so well known, it was hard to believe that he was a white man. But I guess a lot of people were delighted to find that out, that it's, he wrote books. He was a very magnificent person. I have lots of stories about Grail. I know that the little girl that they had, and Pony was an Indian woman, a very beautiful one, as a matter of fact. But I remember that they had to start her in school, and my father had a clinic, and the manager was Rural Reed. And Rural Reed, and I believe they didn't have any children, and they took Shirley Dawn so they could put her in school. And I always thought that was such a nice thing to do, so that this child could learn to read and write. I never saw that much of Shirley Dawn, but she was really in our life in a big way, because it was my father's clinic, and she lived with the Rural Reeds. I probably, as I sit and think for a while, I'll think of some more stories, because we did a lot with Rural. He would pack us up to go up to Waskesiu. We'd go for three months, and my father would come every weekend. I don't know, he wasn't really much of a shopper, but he'd come with all the goodies you can imagine. And Waskesiu was a beautiful place. There I learned to swim, I learned to dive, I even saved an Air Force man. As I say, I had no fear of anything. I'd go in the water, I'd go down the banks, right down to the water. Somebody lost their big beach ball, I'd go after it. I'm kind of getting carried away now, but just by the pictures I see in behind my eyes, and I think, what else do you want?
What was happening in the nunneries?
Oh, well, there was a monastery. I went to the Catholic convent, and there was a monastery close by. And my father used to tell us, and now I'm telling a story that he told us, but we always believed that there were tunnels from the nunneries to the monasteries. And certainly made people sit on a lot of stories that they would tell about the I think it was the nuns of Sion, Sion, and I don't remember what the monastery was, but I was taught by the nuns in one grade, and I think it was grade 6.
And where was this?
This was in what could have been Shaunavon. Let me see, we lived in Shaunavon, and then we moved to Prince Albert. Yes, it must have been Shaunavon. I was in grade 4. I remember I had a Miss Barr, Miss Elliott, and I had a Miss Barr, and her whole family lived in Shaunavon. I think that was grade 5, and 1 year at the convent, and then we moved to Prince Albert. And from Prince Albert, I was there to go into grade 10, and my mother and father decided to put me into private school in Winnipeg. Well, I took the train and I entered Rufusland, which I loved. 1 year there, and I practically knew every name in Winnipeg because my mother and father had both gone to university. And my mother's sister, Aunt Anna, was the first female law graduate. My father graduated from medical school, and in 1921, and if you can believe it now, he was one of 14. Imagine 1921, 14 graduates of the medical school in Winnipeg, Manitoba. That, to me, is unreal. When you think of the hundreds that are poured out of the university in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and now Manitoba has so many more, and all across Canada. But of course, it's almost 100 years of living that I've done. It's fun to remember some of these things.
Did your father fight in World War I?
My father certainly did. My father joined the army. And you know, he wanted to join the Air Force, but he found out he was afraid of heights. And he always regretted that he couldn't fly. And he really didn't know how to swim. And he was afraid of water. Well, I guess if you're born on the prairies and you're not used to it, you do have a fear of a huge ocean. And so what was left? The army. But he made a wonderful soldier. My husband also was in the army. And of course, I remember a lot more of the stories from my husband than I do my father, because I wasn't born. My father didn't get married till after the war. My mother had 3 sisters. There were 4 little girls. And my grandfather went to England to take as fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons, and my mind boggles at the fact that he left a wife and four little girls in Winnipeg, Manitoba. I guess, and he had to take a ship. The ship. I wonder how long it took him to get there and then to come back. Anyway, he turned out to have the second fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons in Canada. He did his practice in Winnipeg by horse and buggy. And in my mind's eye, I can see, because my grandmother would go with him, and I can see him making a call, and then she'd have to go and collect the bill. They didn't charge, with paper bills. They went to collect what was owed to them. If my grandfather thought they could afford it, he did an awful lot for nothing, I'm sure.
How did your father visit patients?
My father? You mean by car?
No, airplane.
Oh, well, my father, yes. My father had an airplane in the 20s. I was born in 24. And my father had one airplane and two pilots. And one morning, my mother looked out the window and said, "George, your hangar's on fire and your plane must be in it." And when he went out to investigate, he could drive there. The plane had been burned, and one pilot was away or something, and the other pilot had taken off with whatever proceeds there were. When we moved to Prince Albert, my father went up to Braylord to operate, and the first person he met up there was his former pilot that had taken off. Anyway, they never do anything. It's over and done with. But they used to use the airplane on the weekends for stunt driving and taking people for rides, because that helped defray the costs of the plane. It took a long time to drive. This is on the prairies and to drive, but you could go much faster by aero.